Oh, so I wanted to make an interesting point because we were talking about diversity in the theater and who
Hmm.
wants to go to, who goes to theater and are you playing to the audience or to, some artistic ideal. Now, there's been a significant change in the last, I would say, 3 years in major institutional theaters throughout the country that now have women artistic directors.
Right.
And I think, I mean, if we hadn't had the pandemic, we would have a much better idea of how that's all shaking out. Now we've gone through it, but they've had time to rethink a lot of this, and I think it will be very interesting to see how that develops and how they change theater. And they'll either it will, I mean, it will change, and how it does, I don't know yet. And where it goes, who the hell knows? But there will be, I think, different voices on the stage, and
I,
because the choosers, the pickers, the people that make those artistic decisions are a more female lot and a more diverse lot than they were 5 to 10 years ago.
I think one of the curious things and the way that we could gauge this a little bit better is that with the Zoom theater, it's free for the most part, or it's like $5, $10,
Yeah,
in which case, did a younger, more diverse audience go and watch this? I mean,
yeah.
I have to admit that I'm not a big Zoom formatter because I think that theater turned mediocre in going to Zoom. And though there's been some plays that I've actually loved because it, in the way that it was written, they
Yeah.
were meant to be in boxes. So it didn't feel like it was done.
And
But I think that that could have been a gauge, but nobody thought to gauge it.
um, well, let me push it just a step further. I don't think Zoom is theater. By
Me
definition,
neither.
there's no live actors. Uh,
Exactly.
and I think that's the key definition in distinguishing theater from any other medium. It's live, and the other thing is it's local. I mean, if it's on Broadway, it's in New York. If it's in Chicago, it's Chicago. It's that local. There's no national theater because of that. But Zooms, there's some that have been very good because there's an intimacy that you can share in Zooms that are nice, but there's no soul in Zoom, you
No,
know?
I would agree with you on that. You know, it's funny because my son works in TV and film.
Is that right?
Yeah, and he was like, theater, why do we need it? Why does it have to be here? And then I took him to a bunch of theater.
Yeah. Yeah.
And surprisingly enough, it was Be More Chill that got him. And yeah, because
Yeah.
it related to him. He related to that show a lot. And all of a sudden he's like, okay, I get it. I now get it.
Yeah.
And I was like, thank God.
But that's such a great illustration, though, of why having different kinds of theater and different stories in the theater will, over time, cultivate a more diverse audience that's interested in coming to the theater. Because if everything is, we were talking about the humans before, if everything's the humans, then only people who like seeing the humans are going to go to the theater. And so it's also not necessarily a great barometer to say, like, what makes money right away is going to tell us about where the theater is going to go. Like, as you said, the public gets subsidies from the government.
Right.
Like, it's not necessarily about ticket sales, but the public does some of the best theater in the city, And I think there's like something to be said about, like, yeah, maybe all theater should be more subsidized by the government. Maybe it's not the barometer.
The answer is I think the arts should be subsidized.
Absolutely.
Because then they have a chance to be what they need to be.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a lot of the problem here is that we put things in little boxes and we expect, oh, this box is going to work, this box is going to work. And sadly, if you look at the history of African American theater, things by August Wilson, They don't make money. None of them have. And I'm a huge, huge August Wilson fan.
Yeah, I loved August.
Yeah, me too. I think he had such a voice.
Yeah.
But it never made money. I mean, I loved Shuffle Along.
Yeah.
It closed. I loved After Midnight. It closed. And they tried to keep that open.
Yeah.
The sad thing is that if you want a voice, then you have to support that voice. And I don't think that always happens. And I think that's the conversation that theater people need to have is, how do we get the people that want X, Y, and Z to support X, Y, and Z?
Yeah.
They don't. And that's what I find sad. Be More Chill, prime example. It worked off Broadway, came to Broadway, crashed and burned.
Yeah, now that's an interesting thing, how you take one thing, one play, and the same damn production, and you put it in a different house and it changes. That's an interesting thing. You're talking about, and I think it's also an interesting conversation, is, the divide between commercial theater and nonprofit theater.
Right.
They're not all in sync. When you talk to a commercial producer, they'll say, yeah, it never made any money. But I can tell you a number of shows that I've had that have not made money, but have made a fortune outside of New York.
Right.
New York. And so, it's what's the measuring stick are we using? And a commercial producer, rightly so, uses, did I make money? And somebody in the not-for-profit business, like, I'll give you an example, Rock Schofer, who's a very close professional friend to Kate and I. He's run the Goodman for like 40.
And I love the Goodman. I love what comes out of the Goodman.
Oh, they do great work and always have. And he, so he's kind of the distinguished gentleman of theater now, of not-for-profit. And he says, the government, if we subsidized more, we'll have more diverse audiences. He says it's ticket prices that are keeping it older and whiter. And if you
Right.
lower the price, but you can't do that in commercial theater.
Exactly.
So you have this dichotomy, you have this gap, and there's few things like Hamilton that cross over from the public and go, or chorus line, that cross over and go kablooey.
Well, and also if you look at who was the producer for Hamilton, that's a whole nother story that nobody wants to talk about.
You mean what, Jeffrey or the public?
The Russian oligarchs.
Oh, I didn't know they had dough in it. Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, yeah.
That's really.
They subsidized the public for a while, and nobody wants to take on that subject.
Oh, that's interesting.
I kind of want to know more.
Yeah, I do too.
But
yeah, an oligarch financing something, but
they financed a lot of the public stuff. If you look at the producers of it, that's who it is.
Good, I will. No, that's interesting. It really is.
But it's a subject no one wants to talk about because, God forbid, you talk about the things that we should be talking about.
Well,
I'm a firm believer that if we don't talk and if we don't communicate and if we don't find how the other people really truly think, we're at a standstill.
Right, but so I mean, like that's a good example of that. I mean, all of us are white, and we're having a conversation about why people of color don't come to the theater. I mean, we're actually really not really the people that
demographic.
I know. And so it's kind of a like we're bound to give the wrong answer by default of our perspective on the situation because we're not speaking from experience. We're just observing and then drawing an opinion or drawing a conclusion. So it's there's an underlying premise thing there too,
Yeah, not so much. Because everything that I do is based on fact. I'm a girl that when it was happening, I read the Broadway grosses every day. Once a week, I was on there. I was having a discussion about the Broadway grosses, where things were going, how things were going. I'm somebody that likes to look at the whole picture. I I grew up playing Risk. I think everybody should have had to play Risk
Hmm.
because you think in a whole different way.
Sure.
That's again, thing, because I'm white, I can't think black. Well, I have so many African-American friends and black friends and really seriously a ton of Filipino friends that I'm maybe not the right person to talk about this because this box thing, I think is insane. I think that we can see things in other people's perspectives. I think we're not. And that's the problem. Again, I'm more controversial than most. I own my paper. Except for the Drama Desk or the Outer Critics kicking me out, nobody can really tell me what to think. And I have this thing that if I'm wrong and you can tell me I'm wrong, I'll be the first one to admit that I made a huge mistake. I'm not afraid of that. I'm not afraid of making the mistakes and then admitting that I'm wrong. And I think kind of that's part of the problem here is that we're so afraid to admit we've made a mistake or we're not. Everyone's walking on eggshells now, and I don't understand why. And
I can tell you that I find it challenging with a lot of the new words that have been introduced to my generation, and I don't know necessarily what they mean. But I've found, being around a number of young people, Kate included, who is very good at challenging me, that it's good to ask.
no, I think Kate's great.
Yeah,
We're all good.
and and that's what's interesting about this kind of conversation is, I mean, who the hell knows where theater's going? We don't.
Yeah, I don't think anybody does.
And interesting to speculate every once in a while and talk about it, and I do think it's going to be a different world as theater opens. I know personally the thing as an agent, not as a foundation guy, that I'm interested in finding is a play or a musical with joy.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Right now.
One that's entertaining.
Yes, and like our Vivace Award kind of makes you want to get up and dance. I mean, what's wrong with that?
I don't think there is anything wrong with that. The problem is that from the critics that I know, like entertainment, joy seem to be like these taboo words of that's not theater. And I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And I agree with you. I completely agree with you. Joy, yes.
So there will be something that comes along, and I can guarantee you the four of us don't know what it's going to be, but it will capture the entire public's imagination, and it will be, a big success. I represent Mary Zimmerman. When Metamorphosis was in rehearsal, 9/11 happened.
Right.
And when it opened, weeks after a delay, and there's a lot of death in it. Everybody dies pretty much. We were afraid that, it's going to be the wrong tone in it. But towards the end, we heard flat out weeping. And we knew, I think it's going to work well.
The direction of that show was genius.
Wasn't it? It was. But my point is that I think there will be something, like a metamorphosis that will speak to us in this new and different world we're entering. It is a different world that we're starting to come out into again.
Well, I'm curious because there was a show, a version of Alice in Wonderland done at the Goodman that really it's a musical, should have come here. And I think it is the perfect time to bring this show in.
Was that Looking Glass Alice?
Yes.
We represent that.
Yeah, I think that show is brilliant.
We wanted to come back to New York. It is, and talk about joy. I mean, just the thrill of production, you know, and magic. And
But also, haven't we gone down the rabbit hole? Aren't we in that crazy, like eating the cookie and having the tea party and having people chase? I kind of think that's where we're at.
yeah, music is one of those things that brings joy, you know, and that's why for me, it was really important to have an award for musicals
I'm glad you did.
to try to get half-assedly back to our subject.
Sorry.
But, you know, and part of the Vivace Award is that it makes you want to get up and dance. Because, I mean, I love musicals that make you want to dance.
Well,
you
Kit
know?
and Melissa, the year that you did them, I love their music.
Oh, I'm glad you said that, because they
I
really,
love Kit and Melissa.
and they have a wonderful spirit about them.
I'm a big musical theater fan.
Okay, I'm not going to mess with you.
I'm horrible. I can actually, if I go into a theater
Yeah,
and it's a new musical,
yeah,
I'll come out singing the music.
yeah,
And if they've taken like lines from other shows,
yeah,
I'll start singing that song
yeah.
until I figure out what it was they took from.
That's
Yeah.
another thing, though, I think is key to a good musical. You got to be able to hum a tune when you come out.
From Merrily, that's not a tune you can hum. But I love what you guys are doing, and I think that it's impressive, and I love your statue.
Yeah, okay.
If a playwright or a musician wanted to become a part of this, is there any way that they submit themselves, or do they have to be submitted?
They have to be submitted. So this is something that we've given a lot of consideration, because we know it's an accessibility thing. Like, obviously the best thing in the world is to have an open submission process, but for anyone who's worked in a theater company with an open submission process, as I have, Bruce has,
It's a ton.
it requires a lot. Frankly, it requires a lot of staff, and it requires a lot of staff that are like this is like what I did for a couple years as an intern and as an assistant. And we're not really set up to have that kind of staff. We have we have our board of directors, and all the advisors and directors are volunteers. So they're donating their time. We don't make them even read scripts. We just have them read the letters, the abstracts. So the way that we accommodate for that is that we have new people on the board of advisors. They don't all change out every year, but we do bring in new and different people. And also by having each year's winners come onto the board of directors for the year following when they win. They are like keyed in more than any of the rest of us could be, and they have a really unique perspective because they know what it feels like to win the award. So they can say, oh, these people are uniquely situated at this moment in their careers to receive this kind of accolade and this amount of money. And just so you know, 2 of this year's winners were people who were nominated by the previous winners in their category.
I was just going to ask you to do that.
I'm not going to tell you who exactly it was, because we do keep it anonymous, but I'll say, 2 out of the 9 people is pretty good, or 2 out of the 8 award categories. Yeah.
I was going to say that would be a perfect way to get your nominees, is to have the previous winners.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get it to the next.
Absolutely.
You have this great, wonderful energy that comes back,
Mm-hmm.
And so like Kit and Melissa, as you rightly know, are like sunshine personalities,
Right.
They're lovely to be around. They have a great infectious energy. Well, when they bring that to our board meeting, it's thrilling. It really is. When they say, listen, you have to pay attention to this. And then everybody goes, oh, well, yeah, I see what you mean. Okay. And that's kind of how it works. And
That's lovely.
yeah, and it's that kind of positive advocacy that wins the day in the room. And it's an interesting thing to see. You know, there is a little bitchiness occasionally, but people,
Isn't there always in theater?
yeah, right. And it's funny, you know. But at the end of the day, you know, it's a very positive thing, and all these advisors enjoy the time they put into it.
Mm.
Yeah.
I am so glad we had this conversation because I think this is something that's needed to be talked about and said. And thank you for going along with me and discussing it. I appreciate that.